How could you be so damn selfish? My father shouted, his voice nearly drowning out the gentle lapping of lake water against the dock outside our vacation home in Mount Elston. He was pacing the hardwood floor like a man betrayed, his face flushed with fury, finger stabbing the air toward me as if I had just spat on the family name. Your brother needs that money for his startup. You have more than enough, Evelyn. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my feet rooted to the floor, still holding the property tax bill he had just shoved across the coffee table like a courtroom exhibit. I couldn't find my voice. This was supposed to be a quiet Sunday dinner, a simple meal with my parents, and somehow it had turned into a cross-examination where I was the defendant, and my only crime was saying no. My name is Evelyn Grant. I'm 35 years old, living alone in Boulder, Colorado, and I've built a successful career as a self-taught financial trader. No one handed me anything. I earned every cent through years of grinding, late nights, and relentless discipline. But no one in my family ever asked how I got here. They only noticed that I did. I never bragged about what I provided. I paid the taxes on this vacation home for 6 straight years. I covered my younger brother Aaron's car payments when his business failed. I paid off hospital bills for my mother when insurance fell short. I even quietly funded family vacations, all without expecting anything in return. I thought it was gratitude. In hindsight, it was guilt. But that night, standing in the same living room where we used to play board games as kids, I realized something chilling. In their eyes, I wasn't a daughter. I was a dependable bank account with a warm smile, and they expected me to keep giving, without limits. I still didn't understand why they could be so callous, until my eyes drifted to a partially hidden envelope under a magazine on the table. I hadn't meant to snoop. I truly hadn't. But the bold black letters on the exposed corner stopped me cold. Grant Family Trust, 4. Aaron Grant. And that was the moment everything started to unravel. I wasn't born into wealth, privilege, or second chances. Everything I have today, every cent in my portfolio, every quiet evening in my downtown Boulder condo was built from long nights, empty bank accounts, and a stubborn refusal to give up when things got hard. My journey into trading started not because I loved numbers, but because I needed a way out of financial insecurity, out of feeling like I owed everyone something, and couldn't even afford to owe myself peace. I was 27 when I made my first real profit on the market. It came after nearly 2 years of devouring every book I could find on market patterns, price action, and risk tolerance, all while working double shifts at a local diner and tutoring high school math in the evenings. I didn't have a mentor. I had YouTube videos, borrowed library books, and a battered laptop that overheated every few hours. There were no shortcuts, only blind persistence. When my trades finally began to yield consistent returns, I didn't celebrate. I didn't take a vacation or buy myself anything new. I paid off my lingering student debt, the one I'd accumulated by cobbling together community college classes and state school tuition, working weekends to stay enrolled while my younger brother Aaron was sent off to a private university with full family support and a brand new SUV. At the time, I didn't question the difference. My parents told me money was tight when I applied to college, so I did what I had to. I assumed their generosity to Aaron was the result of better times, maybe smarter planning. I didn't want to believe they had simply chosen to invest in him, and not in me. But I gave anyway. That's who I was. That's how I was raised. To give back, to support those you love, to shoulder the burden when others can't. So when Dad asked if I could cover the property taxes on the Mount Elston lake house just for this year, I said yes. When Aaron's business idea fell through and he couldn't keep up with his car loan, I quietly started making the payments. When Mom needed surgery on her knee and insurance wouldn't cover the full amount, I sent the money over the same day. No one ever asked me if I could afford it. No one offered to pay me back. And truthfully, I never asked them to. I told myself it was love, that this was what families did for each other. But deep down, I had started to feel like my generosity wasn't a gift anymore. It was an expectation, a role I'd been cast in without a script. Year after year, I found myself funding our so-called family vacations, beach trips, ski weekends, Thanksgiving getaways, always under the premise that we'd split costs later, only for no one to follow up. At first, I didn't mind. I liked seeing my parents happy, especially Mom, who would sit on the balcony with her coffee and talk about how proud she was of me. Though never proud enough, it seemed, to intervene when Dad shifted more financial responsibility onto my shoulders. It became routine. I'd show up to their house with gifts, groceries, and cheerful updates about my work, and leave with another bill, another favour, another weight to carry. Aaron, meanwhile, floated between jobs and relationships, his failures always met with support and second chances, while my success was treated like proof that I didn't need help, as if competence exempted me from compassion. Looking back, I realised the warning signs were always there. When Aaron was given dance lessons and music camps while I was told to focus on academics because those things cost money, I didn't question it. When he got a brand new car for his 16th birthday while I rode the city bus to my part-time job, I smiled through it. When he came home from college with stories of professors who mentored him while I balanced homework with a 30-hour work week at a local coffee shop, I told myself our paths were simply different, not unequal. But the truth is, my parents had always made their choice, and I had always made mine, to give, to show up, to sacrifice. And over time, I stopped seeing it as sacrifice at all. I called it duty. I called it love. Until that night, when my father shouted at me across the living room and pushed that tax bill into my hands like it was my debt, not theirs, and suddenly, every check, every text that said, "Thank you," every time I swallowed my pride, came rushing back like an old wound split open. I saw with painful clarity that in the eyes of my family, my value wasn't in who I was, but in what I could provide. And that realization, sharp, cold, and impossible to unsee, was the beginning of the end. It was just a corner of paper, barely peeking out from beneath a glossy issue of Rocky Mountain Living. But something about the way it was carelessly tucked under the magazine drew my eyes to it, as if it wanted to be found. I reached out, hesitated for a heartbeat, then slid the envelope free before my father could react. His posture stiffened the moment he noticed what I was holding, but he said nothing at first. The envelope was thick, official, and bore the unmistakable imprint of a trust services firm I recognized from years of financial reading, Glenrock Fiduciary Group. In bold, centered type, it read, "Grant Family Trust, for Aaron Grant." My fingers trembled as I opened it, scanning through lines of structured legal language that made my breath catch. I wasn't imagining it. This was real. This was formal. A trust fund, not a plan or a future intention, but a fully established financial structure created specifically for my younger brother. $350,000 was already sitting in it, with clauses in place for annual contributions, additional matching funds, and even protective clauses shielding the assets from business losses. It was airtight, generous, and meticulously crafted, the kind of support I had begged for, in quieter, more desperate ways, when I was trying to make rent on a student budget, or fix my broken-down Honda with only $112 left in my checking account. "You weren't supposed to see that," my father snapped, his hand darting forward to snatch the papers away, but I didn't let go until I had memorized what I needed. My heart was racing, not just from the betrayal, but from the horrifying clarity that came with it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. The imbalance I had tried so hard to rationalize for years wasn't some figment of perspective. It was policy. It was documented. It was signed and sealed. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm building in my chest. "Or were you ever going to?" He didn't answer, and that silence, that damn silence, told me everything I needed to know. I looked over at my mother, who hadn't moved from the couch. Her hands were still folded in her lap, her eyes still downcast, as if avoiding my gaze would somehow make her complicity disappear. "You told me there wasn't enough to help with college," I continued, my voice quieter now, almost disbelieving. "When I needed a down payment for an apartment, when I was drowning in work and school and barely sleeping, you said money was tight. But it wasn't, was it? You just decided I wasn't worth investing in." "Sweetheart," my mother said softly, her voice coated in the same patronizing calm I used to mistake for comfort. "You've always been the strong one. You didn't need as much help. Aaron's different. He's still figuring things out." I stared at her, stunned at the logic, the way she twisted my independence into a liability, a reason to exclude me from the very support that had been freely, quietly handed to my brother. So I was being punished for my competence. My reward for surviving without help was being overlooked when help was abundant. It was a cruel math, and one I hadn't realized they'd been calculating for decades. My father finally broke the silence, but not to apologize or explain. "The taxes on the lake house are due next month," he said, sliding the same bill back toward me with the casual detachment of a landlord issuing a reminder. "And the HOA fees went up again. I assume you'll take care of it?" I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the sheer audacity of it all left me with no other way to release the disbelief clawing at my throat. After everything I had just uncovered, after all the years of shouldering their expenses without acknowledgement, he still expected me to pay. A switch flipped inside me. It was quiet, clean, and final. The moment a lifetime of programmed obedience dissolved into clarity. I picked up the bill, folded it neatly, and placed it into my bag. "I'll take care of it," I said, my tone unreadable. He relaxed, misreading my calm for compliance. What he didn't realize was that I had just taken the first step, not toward paying, but toward leaving the entire illusion behind. The drive home was quiet, but not peaceful. The snow-capped peaks surrounding Boulder, which normally grounded me in awe and perspective, felt cold and distant that evening, like silent judges watching as I pieced together the full scope of what I had allowed. Back in my apartment, I opened a password-protected folder on my computer, one I had labeled Family Contributions years ago, more out of habit than purpose. What filled the screen was overwhelming. Spreadsheets, receipts, transaction records, screenshots of text messages thanking me for covering this or that. There it was, 5 years of documented financial sacrifice. The numbers were staggering: $52,000 in property tax payments, $11,600 in car payments for Aaron, $12,000 for a new roof on the lake house, $8,200 for Mom's surgery, over $20,000 in gifts for vacations that were pitched as family bonding but funded solely by me. The total approached $118,000. And that didn't even account for the lost growth that money could have earned in my own investment accounts. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. "Dad says you're being difficult about the taxes. Don't be selfish, Evelyn." Another from my father followed shortly. "We're counting on you to handle this. Don't let the family down." No thank yous. No recognition. Just expectations, just demands, as though I had somehow signed an invisible contract I never agreed to. They had the nerve to call me selfish while quietly stockpiling security for Aaron, dismissing my contributions as obligations rather than the acts of love they had once been. But that love had limits. And tonight, I had finally found mine. That night, sleep evaded me like it had so many times during my college years, when I'd lie awake with textbooks beside me and worry on my chest, wondering how I'd cover tuition or make it to work on time the next morning. But this time, it wasn't financial stress that kept me up. It was the devastating clarity that I had never truly been seen, let alone valued, by the people I had sacrificed the most for. I sat in silence as the city lights flickered through my apartment window, staring at the spreadsheet that held the sum of my loyalty. The numbers didn't just represent money. They were proof of devotion, evidence of the countless ways I had stepped up without being asked, only to be quietly taken for granted. And now that the illusion had been shattered, the betrayal settled into me like winter frost. Not loud, not fast, but deep and undeniable. By morning I wasn't angry, not in the fiery, reckless way that demands revenge for its own sake, but in the still, grounded way that only comes after years of erosion. It wasn't just about the trust fund anymore. It was about every time they had looked me in the eye and lied through a mission. Every moment I'd been made to feel as though I didn't need support simply because I was strong enough to survive without it. I called in sick to my home office that day, not because I was ill, but because I needed to reclaim a piece of my life that had slowly been chipped away in silence. Then I drove across town to the modest office of Joseph Klein, the financial advisor who had been helping me manage my investments since my portfolio finally stabilized 3 years ago. I hadn't told him much about my family, only what was necessary for estate planning and tax strategy. But when I handed him the flash drive containing the full scope of my financial contributions, meticulously documented over half a decade, he sat back in stunned silence. "This is extensive," he murmured as he flipped through the spreadsheet, eyes narrowing with each new line. "And you've never asked them for a penny back?" "They're my family," I replied simply, though even to my own ears, the words rang hollow. I wanted to help. He leaned forward, removing his glasses and folding his hands with a level of seriousness I rarely saw in him. "Evelyn, your generosity is commendable, but what you've done here, it's not just support, it's subsidizing. You've enabled a system that's unsustainable for you and unhealthy for them. This isn't how family should work." His words didn't sting. They affirmed something I had refused to say aloud. I nodded, then quietly told him about the trust, the real reason I was there. Joseph's expression darkened. "That changes things," he said. "You need a forensic accountant, someone who can verify these numbers and, if necessary, create a formal record you can use, legally or personally." He recommended Victor Hernandez, a meticulous financial investigator who specialized in complex family money disputes. Within the hour, I was in Victor's office, sitting across from a man who didn't blink once as he absorbed the scale of what I'd contributed. The taxes, the repairs, the insurance gaps, the quiet bailouts dressed up as holiday gifts. "Most people don't keep this kind of record," Victor remarked, tapping through the files with growing appreciation. "This is accountant-level precision." "My career taught me to log every cent," I said. "I never thought I'd need to use it for this." He nodded, and for the next 2 hours we built a plan. We compiled supporting documents, requested bank statements, and organized payment histories. Victor walked me through every step, never pressuring me toward litigation, but also not sugarcoating the reality that what my family had done, while not criminal, was morally repugnant and financially abusive. When we were done, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grief, the kind that settles into your bones when you realize something is truly, irreversibly broken. But beneath that grief, something new began to take shape. Resolve. I wasn't planning to sue my parents. I wasn't interested in embarrassing them or dismantling what little family cohesion still existed. But I was done pretending. I was done contributing while they continued to deceive and demand without accountability. And I needed them to see in black and white what I had given and what it would mean when I finally stopped. 3 days later, I received the notarized report, a comprehensive line-by-line financial statement totaling $118,745 in direct contributions, with an additional $14,915 in estimated lost investment returns based on the performance of my portfolio. It was the full, undeniable cost of being the reliable one. And with that document in hand, I finally knew what to do next. I didn't respond right away. After receiving the finalized financial report from Victor, every dollar tracked, every date recorded, every sacrifice quantified. I needed a day to sit with the weight of it. I looked over the document more than once, not to double-check its accuracy, which was beyond question, but to remind myself that what I had been feeling wasn't exaggerated, wasn't melodrama. It was math. It was history. It was truth, made visible. Still, when the first text came through, I felt my jaw tighten in reflex. "We haven't received the tax payment," my father wrote, as if nothing had changed, as if I was still the family's silent safety net, ready to absorb the next expense without so much as a thank you. Minutes later, Aaron chimed in, his tone laced with entitled irritation. "Dad says you're being difficult. Seriously, Evelyn, after all they've done for you." Not a word about the trust. Not a single acknowledgement of the documentation I now held in my hands, like armor forged from years of being overlooked. I muted the thread. That silence, though, didn't last long. My mother called that evening, her voice carefully measured, her concern wrapped in layers of control. She spoke as if nothing serious had occurred, asking politely if I would still be taking care of things before the tax due date. When I replied simply and clearly that I would not, there was a pause long enough to make the air between us feel brittle. "What do you mean?" she asked, and in her voice I could hear not confusion but panic. "I mean," I said calmly, "I'm not paying the taxes this year, or ever again." "But we're counting on you," she said, the practiced softness of her voice beginning to fray. "You've always been the one we could rely on." "And that's the problem," I replied. "I've been reliable to a fault. But that reliability has been exploited, and I won't pretend not to see it anymore." There was no screaming, no name-calling, just a silence that grew heavier with each second, until she finally exhaled and said almost quietly, "Your father told me you saw the trust." "I did," I confirmed. "And now I understand everything." I ended the call without waiting for a defense. I didn't need one. The next morning, I cancelled the automatic car payment for Aaron's vehicle, removed myself as an authorized user on every family utility and joint account I had access to, and transferred $120,000 from my main brokerage account into a newly designated portfolio labeled My Future. It wasn't petty. It wasn't revenge. It was the first time I had chosen myself. By noon, the fallout began. My phone lit up with a barrage of calls, texts, and voicemails that ranged from pleading to furious. Aaron, predictably, was the loudest. "What the hell, Evelyn? The bank says the car payment bounced. Are you trying to ruin my credit? I have plans this weekend." My father didn't waste time with emotion. His message was blunt. "Call me immediately. This is unacceptable." I ignored them all. That day, the markets were volatile, and my attention belonged to my trades, not to a family that saw my value only through the lens of what I could provide. Later that evening, a voicemail from my mother came in, her voice trembling slightly. "Your father is beside himself. The tax notice came with a late fee warning. Aaron can't make his car payment. We don't understand why you're doing this. Whatever's upset you, we can talk about it. Please call us back." No apology, no reference to the trust, no mention of the decade I'd spent funding their lifestyle. Just panic over a shift in routine, one that in their eyes should never have shifted at all. Then came the escalation. My building's security called to inform me that a man named Gregory Grant, my father, was in the lobby, demanding to see me. He refused to leave. I instructed them, without hesitation, to contact the police if necessary. "Very well, Mom," the guard replied. 20 minutes later, a text from my cousin Emily arrived. "I just saw your dad being escorted out of your building by security. Are you okay?" I responded simply, "Family financial disagreement." Her reply stunned me. Good. Someone had to stand up to them. It's been unfair for years. Until that moment, I had believed no one else saw what I saw. That message, small, unexpected, and deeply validating, felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. That evening, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw Aaron standing outside, arms crossed, posture tight with performative indignation. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What is your problem?" he said immediately, eyes narrowed. "You're refusing to pay the taxes. You cancelled my car payment. What kind of game are you playing?" "It's not a game," I said evenly. "It's a reckoning." He blinked, confused. "I've contributed nearly $120,000 to this family over the last 5 years, while Dad secretly built a trust fund for you," I continued, watching his face shift from indignation to surprise, then to something like guilt, though it was hard to tell if it was real or reflex. "That's different," he said after a beat. "I need that trust. I'm still finding my path." "And I didn't?" I asked. "You've had help every step of the way, Aaron. I've been working since I was 16 just to keep my head above water while you had dance lessons, private tutors, a new car, a fully funded education, and now a 6-figure trust. Meanwhile, I've been paying for the house you vacation in." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Dad says without the tax payment they might lose the lake house," he muttered, as if that might sway me. "Then maybe," I said, stepping back and gently closing the door between us, "they can dip into your trust." I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed. The property tax deadline came and went without a payment from me, and I kept my silence, refusing to engage with the stream of messages that flowed in like a broken faucet, each one an echo of entitlement, a variation of the same desperate refrain. "Why are you doing this to us?" But I wasn't doing anything to them. I had simply stopped doing everything for them. With each passing day, I focused on work, on recalibrating my future now that I was no longer bleeding money to maintain someone else's comfort. Joseph helped me restructure my portfolio, adjusting my risk exposure now that I had breathing room. For the first time in years, I increased my retirement contributions and even began looking at vacation properties, modest places, nothing extravagant, but spaces that would be mine alone, untouched by guilt or obligation. Then, out of nowhere, an email arrived from my Uncle Warren, my father's older brother, someone I hadn't heard from in years. His tone was cautious but clearly curious. "Evelyn, what's going on with your dad and the lake house? He reached out last night asking for a $10,000 loan to cover penalties. He mentioned you were refusing to help the family anymore. That doesn't sound like you. Everything okay?" I sat back in my chair, letting the hypocrisy settle like sediment in still water. My father, who had dismissed my contributions for years, was now approaching extended family for money rather than touching so much as a penny of Aaron's trust fund. I didn't respond in anger. I attached a summarized version of my financial statement, stripped of emotion but filled with detail, and I added a short note. "Here's why I stepped back." Warren's reply came within the hour. "Evelyn, I had no idea. None of us did. Greg's been telling everyone he's supporting both you and Aaron equally. This changes things." Apparently it did. The next evening, I received a call from my cousin Grace, who rarely involved herself in family politics. Her voice was urgent. "Evelyn, I thought you should know. There's a meeting this Saturday at your parents' house. Dad says it's to discuss the lake house situation and your so-called abandonment. Sounds like your father is trying to rally everyone against you." I stayed quiet for a moment, not surprised but still stung by the familiarity of the tactic. "Thanks for the warning," I said. "There's more," Grace added. "I overheard Dad and Uncle Greg talking. They're planning to guilt you into covering the back taxes and late fees, framing it like you're trying to destroy the family legacy." I closed my eyes, feeling the absurdity wash over me. "Are you going to be there?" "I am," she said, her voice stronger now, "and so should you. It's time someone speaks the truth. You won't be alone." That Saturday, I dressed not to intimidate, but to command respect. Tailored slacks, a blazer, and the quiet power of someone who no longer had anything to prove. When I arrived at the house, the living room was already full. Uncles, aunts, cousins, all seated in a semicircle like a tribunal. My father stood at the fireplace mid-speech, gesturing like a man building a case. When he saw me enter, he paused but quickly regained composure. "Evelyn," he said, nodding curtly, "I'm glad you came. We were just discussing the tax crisis and the need for everyone to step up for the family." I didn't speak right away. I placed my leather folio on the coffee table, opened it slowly, and pulled out printed copies of the notarized financial summary Victor had prepared. I handed them out, page by page, without ceremony. "We're not here to talk about taxes," I said calmly. "We're here because for 5 years, I've carried the financial weight of this family in silence. Property taxes, vehicle payments, roof repairs, vacations, medical bills. While my parents secretly built a $350,000 trust for Aaron without ever offering me similar support. This isn't about abandonment. This is about accountability." The room fell into stunned quiet. My Aunt Clara, never one to mince words, looked directly at my father. "Greg, is this true?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. It didn't matter. The papers in their hands said everything. "For years," I continued, my voice steady but edged with years of pain, "I believed I was giving from a place of love, but now I see it was compliance. It was survival. And it ends now." My Uncle Martin, seated near the back, shook his head. "If you've been paying the taxes, Evelyn, then you deserve a stake in that property." I hadn't even considered that. The house was in my parents' names, despite my contributions, but suddenly, the idea didn't feel outrageous. It felt fair. "I don't want the house," I said, looking around the room. "I want acknowledgement. I want the truth to be part of this family's story, not just whispered behind closed doors." The discussions swelled into chaos, some defending me, others too shocked to speak. Through it all, my father sat rigid, face flushed, unable to control the narrative for the first time in decades. And as I met his eyes, I saw something shift. Not contrition, not apology, but a deep, reluctant respect rooted in fear. The illusion had cracked, and he knew it. That night, for the first time in my life, I left my parents' house without feeling smaller than when I entered. I didn't win a war. I had simply told the truth in a room that wasn't ready to hear it, and that alone was power. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. "The property taxes are due." No apology. No mention of the meeting. Just the same old command. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then calmly texted back a photo of the notarized statement, the total circled in red ink. An hour later, the unexpected happened. It wasn't my father who called, it was Aaron. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Dad showed me the report," he said. Is it really that much?" "Yes," I said, offering no softening. "Every line is verified." There was silence on the other end. Then, to my surprise, he spoke with a level of remorse that sounded real. "I didn't know. I thought you helped here and there because you had extra. I didn't realize you were the only one giving." "That's because they never told you," I said. "And you never thought to ask." "I want to fix this," he said. "I know it's late, but I'll talk to Dad. He needs to see what he's done." And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed he might. The next day, I received an envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal statement confirming that the property taxes on the Mount Elston Lake House had been paid in full. But what caught my eye wasn't the receipt. It was the attached amendment to the property deed. According to the enclosed documentation, I now owned a 25% stake in the home I had been funding for years. And at the bottom of the page was a handwritten note from the attorney. At Ms. Megan Grant's instruction, this transfer was completed using a portion of her trust. For a moment, I just sat there, the paper in my hands, trembling slightly as the implications settled over me. Megan, my brother, had done what my parents never had. He'd acknowledged what I was owed. And he hadn't stopped there. A few hours later, my phone rang again. It was Megan. "I spoke with Dad," he said, his voice stripped of defensiveness. "It wasn't easy, but I told him I wanted the trust split evenly. He fought it at first, said I was being manipulated, but when Uncle Warren and Aunt Clara backed me up, he finally agreed to meet with his financial advisor." "And he's going to do it?" I asked, not because I doubted Megan's intentions, but because I had learned not to expect fairness from those who benefit most from imbalance. "He's working on the paperwork now," he replied. "It might take a few weeks, but it's happening." There was a long pause. Not awkward, just full of weight, before he added, "I know it doesn't fix everything, but I wanted you to know I see it now. I see you now, and I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." Something in me softened then, not in a way that erased the years of damage or excused the silence, but in a way that made space for the possibility that change, however belated, was still worth accepting. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine, opened the windows to let in the spring air, and sat with the peace I had earned, not demanded, not begged for, but claimed through patience, truth, and unwavering clarity. I thought about the years I had spent sacrificing in the dark, the weight of invisible labor, and how even when no one clapped or thanked me, I had still shown up. I had still given. And that part of me, the part that loved despite being overlooked, wasn't weakness, it was strength. My parents never sent an apology. The closest thing I received was a message from my mother a few days later, simple and quietly confessional. "Your father is struggling with all of this, but I want you to know. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. I should have done the same." I didn't reply right away. Some words take time to mean anything. Since then, life has changed in subtle but profound ways. I've stopped explaining myself to people who never ask the right questions. I've let go of being the reliable one if it means erasing myself in the process. And I've started building my own legacy, not from guilt or obligation, but from intention. I bought a small cabin in Estes Valley, nothing grand, just a place with trees and silence and a porch that catches the morning light. It's mine, all mine. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not walking away sooner, if I would have done things differently had I known how deep the unfairness ran. And the truth is, maybe. But maybe not, because every step, every sacrifice, every dollar that was taken without gratitude helped shape the steel in my spine, the clarity in my voice, and the boundaries I now hold without apology. I'm not the same woman I was when I walked into that lake house for dinner, and I never will be again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated or taken for granted by the people who should have cherished you most, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments, or simply let us know how you took your power back. We read every comment. Your voice matters. This is the Underdog's Revenge, where justice begins with being heard. Like, subscribe and stay for the stories that speak your truth.